Good morning, church family. Today we're going to be in Luke chapter 23 as we go through our readings, and we're going to start in verse 1. It reads, "When the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, 'We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, the king.' So Pilate asked Jesus, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' 'You have said so,' Jesus replied. Then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, 'I find no basis for a charge against this man.' But they insisted, 'He stirs up people all over Judea by his teachings. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here.'" You know, it's interesting to me the charges that the Sanhedrin brings up against Jesus. They bring up against him that he doesn't pay taxes to Caesar and that he claims to be the Messiah, the king. I find this interesting for two reasons. One, that the Sanhedrin would bring up that the charge in which Pilate must now deal with Jesus is that he doesn't pay taxes to Caesar. To think that the Sanhedrin would step into this position and speak about the authority that the Roman government had to collect taxes, it spoke against what was happening culturally within Jerusalem. You know, tax collector was someone that was hated by the individuals because anyone who would pay taxes to an opposing nation was truly seen as a traitor. Because in doing so, the collecting of taxes, they were helping the institution that is oppressing their people. But here, when it serves them best, they turn to Pilate and say, "This man hasn't been paying his taxes. You have to deal with him." Turning one of their own in and acting traitorous, and in their hearts they thought it was justified because getting rid of Jesus was a bigger deal. And it amazes me how so often we fall into the same trap of allowing the ends to justify the means. That even though this is not how we desire this to be, we act this way when we think it is in our best benefit. We think greater good will be done. And it amazes me how so often in the world that we live in, this is the justification for some of the greatest atrocities in human history, is because we believe that by doing this, by doing wrong, in the end, it will be for a greater good. Sacrificing the life of a few for the lives of many, that must be worth it. And remind that in God's economy, things are different. That God's way and His will trumps our ability or even our ethics at times. Because God sees and He is powerful enough to orchestrate things in accordance with His plan and His glory. But then secondly, they come out and they charge Him for that, saying that He is the Messiah, and He's inciting up people from Judea, and He's moved all the way to Jerusalem as if to say that He is coming as a conquering king, looking to overthrow Rome. That is the accusation made against Him. And when Pilate asks, "Is this true? Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus says, "Hey, you're the one that's saying that." And what Pilate saw very clearly was Jesus was not someone who had been positioning himself or was acting as someone who was going to circumvent Rome in the same manner that Rome had circumvented Jewish ruling class. You see, Jesus didn't come with a sword to slay the enemy. Instead, Jesus came by changing the hearts of people to fall in alignment with the kingdom that was far greater than even Rome. You see, what Jesus has done upon the cross is He desires to move us from being subjects of the world to becoming subjects of heaven. Is Jesus the king? Yes, but He is far more than the king of the Jews. He is the king of heaven. He is the king of all those who claim and pledge their allegiance to God. He is the king of the heavenly realms, the created order. For none of the created order would be here if it were not for Christ, if it were not for Jesus. And so when Pilate says, "I find no basis for a charge against him," Pilate speaks back to the Sanhedrin and says, "Your charges have no basis. For your charges is in your assumption and your judgments, and there's no evidence to back them up." I guess that's what convicts my heart the most in this moment, is how often in my life I turn my back on Christ even though all the evidence speaks otherwise. Even though there's no evidence as to why my ways are the best ways, why my way works itself out for good, I normally choose my way over God's way. And when God's way and my ways don't line up, I often try to manipulate God in order to move him to see that my ways are better than his ways, even though the evidence says his ways are always higher than my ways, and his ways always work out for my good and for his glory. So I wonder today, are we caught making assumptions? Are we caught choosing ourselves again over the Lord in spite of the evidence that God has placed upon our hearts and our lives? Maybe today is the day to stand as Pilate and say, there is no reason why I must believe my way is better. There's no basis for this, but instead I must choose God and what he's doing. If that's you, if you comment section below, I'd love to pray with you. Look forward to continue on our study through the book of Luke as we continue through Luke chapter 23.